Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to talk about disappearing from the public record. How to use LLCs and land trusts to magically disappear, get your name out of that public record, especially when dealing with businesses and real estate. So if you're a real estate investor or a real estate owner, and this includes owning your home, you can get your name off of a property absolutely 100% in any state. I don't care what they're telling you. We can do this any state in the United States. We can get your name off of your property so somebody cannot look up your name and figure out where you live. Now, why is this even an issue? Like, why is privacy such a big thing? Well, recently there have been cases where celebrities, sports stars have been targeted because you could see they're not at home. Like they're traveling, they may be playing an away game, or they may be traveling at an event. Somebody looks up, finds their address, shows up at their home, invites themselves in, steals their stuff, or otherwise messes with that property. So I'll tell you, I've had folks that were in law enforcement where they automatically get their names out of a public record, or in the medical establishment. For example, a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, and the last thing they want is at 2 a.m., one of their patients showing up at their home, knocking on the door. My partner Clint grew up with this, where his mother actually had to worry because when his dad would go out of town, they had tenants and they self-managed all these properties. And the tenants knew when the dad left and would call up his mom and say, "Hey, I know you're over there by yourself. How about some company?" And she would end up sleeping with a gun. She told Clint, "Don't sneak up on me at night because I don't want to mistake you for somebody who has ill intent." Right? Those things actually happen. The last thing we want is somebody who decides to make our lives, maybe it's a stalker, maybe it's you're involved in a lawsuit, maybe it's a disgruntled tenant. You don't want them showing up at your house. So there's a reason for privacy there. The other reason for privacy is to take the target off your back. You've probably seen videos like why it's beneficial to look poor, or how to be invisible in other settings. The reason that we're doing that is because there are people that sue folks that have deep pockets. In other words, they perceive that you have wealth, so they know that there's a value in settlement to just shaking you down in a frivolous lawsuit and making sure that, hey, I'm going to make you waste a bunch of time and energy. And in the American system, rarely do you get attorney's fees unless it's contractual or statutory. So you're probably not going to they're going to end up having to go into their pocket. And what happens with the wealthy, especially when people know what you have, is they target. So a tenant that knows you have 10 properties is probably going to treat you differently than if they think you only have one. Their lawyer will definitely treat you differently because the lawyers on those types of cases are generally contingency, and they only get paid if they actually get money out of you. So they want to make sure you have something to take. And if they can't see what you own, well, our experience has been that they drop you out of suits or don't even happen. And there are cases where we've had siblings, one of whom was our client, one of whom was another firm's client. Our client used security by obscurity by keeping their affairs private and keeping their name out of the public record. And they were released from a suit, the same lawsuit. They were co-defendants. One sibling was released earlier than the other for a peppercorn, and the other one ended up 4 or 5 years of intense litigation and ultimately settled for a very high figure, 7 figures in that particular case, because they could see what they owned. And the punchline was our client had more assets than the one that ended up getting shut down for all that period of time. We just experienced this again with another client that was sued, a frivolous suit in California. A bunch of people got sued. She was in one of in the reign of defendants. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I've never had this happen to me before. I didn't do anything wrong. They're just throwing me in there." And the attorney even said it's a shotgun. We're looking for deep pockets. Since you don't have deep pockets, we're going to dismiss you. And they dismissed her within a couple of months. And she was greatly relieved. The reason they dismissed her is because they could not see what she owned because she had substantial assets. Over and over and over again, we see that privacy is the secret sauce of maintaining a lawsuit-free lifestyle. But how to get there? So let's talk about that. So we just hit why it actually matters. But let's talk about the vehicle that we're going to use to get there. Number one, we're going to be using an LLC, and we're going to use an LLC in a state where, here, I'm going to draw this up for you so you actually see it. We're going to use an LLC in a state that does not require disclosure of its owners. And when you say LLC, it's limited liability company. It's a creature of a state law. All states in the United States have a statute that allows the creation of the LLC. And what it does is it creates separation between you, here's you, and the LLC. If something happens inside the LLC, it does not come out and affect you. It bounces back, stays inside the LLC. Same thing. You get sued. They can't take that LLC away from you. Under the statutes of certain states, they can never take it away from you. In some states, they could potentially foreclose on your interest, which is why we go to states where it's boom. If you have your personal realm, it stays inside your personal realm. The business realm stays inside the business. We do not want them going like this, coming and taking your LLC. We want to make sure that doesn't happen, and we want to make sure this doesn't happen, that they don't take your assets. And you're saying, what assets do I have? You know, if you have cash, you have your cars, you have a house, you have other assets that they can foreclose on and try to take, then you have exposure. We don't want them. We're garnishing your wages. You have W-2. Maybe you have 1099 income from a side gig that you're doing or your business. We don't want a occurrence inside of an LLC. Let's say you have a rental property. We don't want that to bleed over and for them to walk into your personal realm to take your stuff. We want to isolate it. And that's what that LLC does. It creates separation between you over here and the business over here. And that means that you're responsible for your stuff. The business is responsible for its stuff. And so if you're running a business, make sure that you're using a vehicle like an LLC. In the situation of real estate, we like it because real estate, just owning it, comes with liability, right? If you have somebody falls on that property, trip and fall, you lease it to a tenant, and they invite people over who fall down the stairs, you get sued as the landlord. There's certain things you just can't do anything about. So you try to carry insurance, but insurance knows here's the things that cause us big liability, and they create exceptions for it. So, for example, mold or other types of suits where they can push the liability back over the landlord. You want to make sure that they never get out of that box, that they're stuck inside that LLC. They can get the equity in that home only, which then let's strip the equity out. Number two, we're going to use an LLC that has privacy in the public record. So, for example, in many states, when you set up an LLC, so let's say you set up an LLC in any state, I'm just going to call it that, and they require a member listed or a manager. Most states require that. There are states like Wyoming and Nevada where that is not necessary. We can use a nominee in Nevada. We don't even have to list it in Wyoming. And I'm just going to say Wyoming's the best. That's what we use because it's inexpensive and there's no listing. What does that mean? It means when somebody sees ABC LLC and they want to know who its owners are, they can't see that. More importantly, they can't look up an owner and see that that owner owns the LLC. More likely than not, you would be targeted because of something you did. Maybe you're a doctor. Maybe you're have a profession where somebody decides that they have a beef with you. Maybe you're a landlord. There's just an infinite number of things that you can get sued for. But they look at you and they say, let's say here's Toby. What does Toby own? And they look into the database. They go into corporate records. There's open records and a bunch of others. And they see Toby owns ABC LLC. And then they target ABC LLC, or they go after you knowing that they're going to try to take the LLC interest that you hold. In the situation of Wyoming, they cannot do that. They can look at Toby, but they're going to see nothing. They will not see ABC LLC. Now, you might be saying, hey, Toby, you mentioned real estate. In my state, we have to list out the member, so this won't work. Let me show you how it would actually work. Let's say that we have a property and we decided to put it in an entity. We're going to actually use a land trust in conjunction with this. I'll show you how it works to even make it even more strong. But let's just say that in your state, you have a piece of real estate in an LLC, and you're saying, yeah, but I have to list the member, and that member equals Toby. Okay, here's an easy fix. Toby up here sets up a Wyoming LLC where his name is not listed. So nothing is listed in the public records. That files the LLC as a member managed LLC. And the member, therefore, is this Wyoming LLC. And where's Toby's name associated with it? Nowhere. Because you're smart enough to realize, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to be my own registered agent. Anderson does that. That's what we do. I'm not going to have my name listed anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and use this Wyoming entity, and my name is not in a public record associated with either of those LLCs. Voila, we just accomplished anonymity in real estate in any state by doing that. Now, we're not going to stop there. I'm going to say that for real estate, there's a unique entity that we like to use called a land trust. And we use this entity because for title purposes, we can take one more step away from disclosure. We don't even have the LLC on the property now. And I'll show you how it works. In a land trust, there's really three parties that you worry about that exists. It's kind of a triangle. You have the beneficiary who gets to right to the rents, the right to occupy the property. They have the stuff that's really valuable. You have the trustee who's on title. They are only on title. And you have the grantor, the person who gave the asset to the trust. In a public record, the only thing listed is the trustee. And I can already hear you people in Arizona going, no, we have to list. You don't. Who's gonna sue you? Right? I don't have to list it. The beneficiary does not have to be listed. I could also use an LLC, but long and short of it is you could do this in any state in the union. Every state recognizes trust. There are certain states that have statutes on it. Every state recognizes trust. So I use living trust all throughout. This is just a grantor trust, plain garden variety trust, but we're using it for privacy. How do we do that? Because the trustee's listed. You say, but Toby, what if Toby's the trustee, he's listed? Correct. We don't use Toby as the trustee. Who might we use as a trustee that's not listed in a public database? Oh, maybe we're going to use our friend Wyoming LLC as the trustee. Voila. You could now have ownership of a piece of property with your name not on it. Could you do this with your house? Yes. It's a very specific type of trust called a personal residence privacy trust. It has to have specific provisions in it with regards to the legal ownership. But yes, you could do this with your personal residence. And you might be saying, but what if I'm in Texas or in Florida? We have unlimited homestead. I don't need this. Your name's still in a public record. This will not ruin your homestead. This does not lose your 121 exclusion, the capital gain exclusion when you sell the property. This just takes your name off of the title. And why is that so important? Because now nobody can see what you own. You want to get rich in the dark. You don't want to have everybody knowing everything that you own. You go on vacation, you're sitting there posting stuff on Instagram or Facebook, and you're not thinking anything of it. And somebody, unbeknownst to you, sees that you're on vacation and says, let me look that person up. Oh, there's their house. I'm going to drive by their house, see if anybody's home. Hey, nobody's home. They're all on vacation, and decide to help themselves to your stuff. That happens. We see it in probates too. We see it anytime there's a disclosure where somebody's able to see, oh, here's stuff, and there's nobody there. They help themselves. So we are really strong advocates for maintaining privacy for your personal affairs and for your business affairs, and especially for real estate, so people can't see what it is that you own. We want to make sure that they can't see what it is that you own and target you as a reason because you own those things. We want to keep you out of that public record. Now, here's how it works. Remember that beneficiary? This is the party that has liability. liability. There we go. Pretend I spelled that right the first time. They're the party that's ultimately responsible. So if there's a house, this is a land trust, and let's say I put a residential property in there, the beneficiary is ultimately accountable because they have all the rights to occupy and to the money in that property. So we might want to isolate that. And you guys are probably already thinking ahead of me. What would we use for that liability? You would, again, use a Wyoming LLC or an in-state LLC. We might just call that, I'll just call it an LLC because in many cases, we're just going to use your home state. Just from a standpoint of, hey, we want to have the LLC in that jurisdiction. So, for example, if I am using a structure where I have a Wyoming trustee as a Wyoming LLC as a trustee, I might have a Wyoming entity that is the ultimate owner of these. So let me just show you what it would look like. Let's say that I have a Wyoming LLC that holds whatever state LLC. And remember, we've kept our name off of the public record, and that one is the beneficiary of a land trust. In this particular case, in a public record, they will not see the state LLC or the Wyoming LLC. They don't see either of those things. The only thing that would be in a public record would be the land trust trustee on behalf. And so we use a nominee trustee, or we use a Wyoming LLC that's a throwaway LLC that's just out there holding no assets. And this is what it will look like. Let's say that this was 123 Main Street. Ordinarily, if somebody bought this property, it would be like Al and Peggy Smith, joint tenants, or tenants in common, or whatever. It's just going to have their name listed on the public record. When we do this, it's going to be 123 Main Street Trust by its trustee, ABC LLC, or whatever you decide to name it. You could even use a lawyer. You could use somebody else to sit in there and act and be in the public record for you so that your name's not out there. So again, you can make this super dig down real deep, or you could keep this very, very simple where you said, hey, I just want my name off of it. And all I'm going to do is maybe I'm going to use a land trust to hold, like, let's say it's my home. I might just want to make sure that it's 123 Main Street Trust, and then Joe Smith lawyer, whoever it is. If you work with us, we give you the option, Joe Smith, somebody in there that's not you. Why do we do that? Again, because it gets your name off the public record. Or we could always use the anonymous LLC. So you could do either one. What's magic is your name is not on there. This is still a grantor trust, which means no due on sale clause because we have the Garden St. Germain Act that still protects the residents. We haven't destroyed our homestead. We haven't destroyed anything from a capital gain exclusion or anything else because this is a grantor trust. It's ignored for tax purposes. It's just the same as you owning it. The only thing we've done is made your name anonymous associated with that property. So that works great. So we've gone over the LLC, we've gone over the land trust, and now we've combined them together so that we are having a super effective way. Now, why would we use a land trust, for example, if we had a bunch of properties in a particular state? We may not want the world to know, let's say that you have an LLC that you have 3 properties. So we have 1, 2, 3 Main, 4, 5, 6 South, 7, 8, 9 North Street. We'll just call those all street. And let's say that you went to a typical lawyer and they said, let's just put an LLC together. Then if something happened on North Street and you had a angry tenant who falls down and gets hurt, they would see this and they would see 1, 2, 3 Main Street and 4, 5, 6 South Street, and they could attach all of those. That's a problem. So a lot of lawyers will say, well, then let's create separate LLCs. Great idea. Now they're in the LLC name and we don't have privacy. Well, okay, so then I could add Wyoming LLC as the owner. Okay, that's getting better. But now that Wyoming LLC is listed on each property. So what's our solution? Here's an easy one. You create your LLCs, but the name on the property is going to be the trustee of that trust in that land trust. In each property, so for example, 123 Main Street is going to be 123 Main Street Trust by its trustee. And let's just say we call it Nothing. We name an LLC Nothing LLC. Who owns it? Nothing. Or make it Nobody. Nobody LLC, right? Well, then we do the same thing with 456 South Street. It would be the 456 South Street Trust by its trustee, Nothing LLC. You see the same thing with North Street. They're in different names. They're not in the LLC name. We could call these LLCs whatever you want to call them. You could call it, Green Frog, Red Toad, Blue Rabbit, whatever, pick some anonymous names, right? LLC. Those are the beneficiaries of that trust. So the liability is still protected in each one of these. Now, if your head is spinning or you're saying, geez, how do I implement this? If you would like a free consultation with an expert on this, all you have to do is put strategy into the comments below. Just type in strategy and we'll send you a link so you can set up a time to talk to a professional who could look at your situation, because all states are a little bit different. We want to make sure it's tweaked to work for you. But you just say, hey, is this something that could benefit me? The answer is more than likely going to be a resounding yes. And then it's just a question of what it looks like to implement it for you. The beautiful thing about this entire structure is this entire thing that I just put down on this piece of, or on this computer can be disregarded for tax purposes. We can make it to where there's not even a tax filing due from this structure. All of this could be ignored, called a disregarded entity for tax purposes when we're talking about the LLCs. The trusts are grantor trusts, which means they're ignored. They're you for tax purposes. So we wouldn't have a bunch of tax compliance. We just have to set up the LLCs. We have to set up the land trust and transfer the property. Once you do that, boom, you're good. You could make it to where there's not a bunch of compliance or things that you have to do to keep these things running. Now, you want to make sure you talk to somebody so that if there is a reason you want a tax filing. So for example, if you wanted to make this thing a partnership and file a 1065, there's a reason for financing. Freddie and Fannie look at a K-1 that comes off of a partnership that ends up on an individual's return and they use 100% of that income. Whereas if it was just you and it showed up on page 1 of your Schedule E, which is you owning something individually or this being disregarded, they use 70%. So if you're trying to get loans to grow your real estate portfolio, you might find that it's better to make a tax designation. But you don't have to know that. That's not the topic for today. What the topic for today is, anybody can make themselves invisible and keep your name out of that public record. For real estate, you could do this for businesses. You can do this for other assets, including like brokerage accounts or other things. We can make it to where you are invisible in a public record. If you like that, like and subscribe. If you know anybody else that could benefit from this information, by all means, share this link with them. Good luck.